Welcome back to Dream Jobs, everybody. It's been a little while, and I decided to come back to you with a very special guest today that I'm super excited about. So before we meet him and hear everything, I'm going to dive into a little piece of his biography, which is so deep with different things. So Sean Tyler Foley is an accomplished film and stage performer and has been acting in film and television since he was 6 years old after the death of his father suddenly from a motor vehicle accident. He's appeared in productions including Freddy Vs Jason, Door to Door, Carrie, and the musical Ragtime. Tyler is passionate about helping others confidently take the stage and impact an audience with their stories. He's currently the managing director of Total Buy-In and author of the #1 best-selling book, The Power of to Speak Naked. Tyler, I struggled through that, but you have a lot of awesome things.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. Yeah, that's the problem when you've done a whole bunch in your life that, you've got to get people to squeeze everything in. And I learned, 5 years into owning my business that I spelled the name of my company grammatically incorrect when I registered it. So that's on me, not on you. Theoretically, there should be a hyphen between buy and in to make it Total Buy-In. And you actually read it the correct way to pronounce it in English. So that's on me for not checking with a copywriter before naming my company.
Well, typically I like to do things in where are you now? How did you get here? Where are you going to go? You do several different things, and we're going to bop around on advice you might have for people wanting to get into acting, speaking, book writing, etc. But why don't you explain what Total Buy-In is and what your daily life is right now?
Oh, wow, what my daily life is. My daily life is I wake up and I check my calendar and try to figure out what my daily life is today. Total Buy-In is a company that was originally put together as a safety consulting organization. And from that, we then created a training division that was focused on specifically helping people be better presenters, because that tends to be one of the larger issues when it comes to safety is poor communication and people really not able to effectively lead presentations, or worse, they lead them, but they're super, super boring. So we wanted to come up with a way that made those presentations significantly more interesting, significantly more vibrant. And so that was the goal then of Total Buy-In. So the training wing became this presentations thing, which then morphed into not just safety specific presentations, but presentations in general. So we started working with a lot of executives and C-suite professionals who wanted to do better with their presentation skills above and beyond the safety realm and just presentations in general. And then so Total Buy-In ironically became a catch-all for all of my companies, whether that's my safety consulting company or the Drop the Mic speaker agency or our Power to Speak Naked training series along with the book. All of these things kind of fall under the grand umbrella of the parent company, Total Buy-In, which I think is funny because that is, the all-encompassing entity for everything.
So it's a logical development then that you came from acting, obviously present speaking, stage training. How did you, let's say from high school on, how did you get into acting? What was that trajectory like? Did you grow up in California?
None of the above. I actually grew up in a very rural community just outside of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, which for anybody who knows it is home to the Calgary Stampede, greatest outdoor show on earth. And in fact, they have a wonderful performing arts program there called the Young Canadians of the Calgary Stampede, which is kind of a triple threat performance camp for a year long because they train for the shows year round that I got to be involved in. So you do the singing, the dancing, the acting. But I actually got involved with that after already being involved in stage, as you had pointed out. My first professional engagement was at 6 years old, getting to play Tiny Tim with our local theater company here, and for their staging of A Christmas Carol, which, I still to this day, I have any version of A Christmas Carol. I watch them all, from the Muppets Christmas Carol to Mickey Christmas Carol. The 1951, 52 black and white version is just phenomenal. I even, have a soft spot for Scrooge, the Jim Carrey animated one, and as well as Scrooged with Bill Murray. So all of those, because it was my first introduction to performance, they resonate with me. But I got to be involved in theater at a very, very early age, and then in my later teens got involved with film and television. At the time, Calgary had a very small film and TV entity, not a lot. There's a lot of famous productions that come here, but it's not like you have film year round. So like Legends of the Fall was filmed here. And the Superman, the first, the original Superman 1 and 2, and Christopher Nolan did bits of Interstellar here, and Brokeback Mountain were filmed here. So all of these well-known productions have come through, but Calgary didn't really have a large film epicenter until very, very recently. So in my late teens, I actually moved out to Vancouver, which is our Hollywood North, our version of California, and really dedicated a good part of my 20s into doing nothing but performance and film and television, and dabbled in a little bit of theater there.
Okay, so couple silly questions about Canadian entertainment. So why is it that so many film productions take place in Vancouver when Vancouver is like the most expensive market on the continent to live in? Why is it that like every time someone's trying to emulate Seattle or parts of California, they do it in Vancouver? Do you know?
Because it's super expensive to live there, but it's super cheap to film there. BC has some of the best film and television credits on the planet. And the Canadian dollar is very forgiving. So if you're not filming in Vancouver, you're filming in Toronto. If you're not filming in Vancouver or Toronto, you're filming in Calgary or Halifax, specifically because of our tax credits, and then the Canadian dollar too. So for essentially, you're getting, a 2-to-1 on your dollar spent. And even though it's expensive to purchase property here, it's still not that expensive to put somebody up in a rental house, which is usually what they do with the big stars. So you fly somebody up, put them in a big mansion in West Vancouver, and you might spend $10,000 or $15,000 a month on the rental, but compared to $500 a day in a hotel, it's actually ridiculously cheap. And then you have the sell of getting to have people come to BC, which for people in California, California is beautiful, but it's smog and it's busy and it's dirty. And you've got Vancouver, which is just pristine. Your minutes to beaches and mountains, and just there. It's a city unlike any other in the world. There's a reason why it was able to host the Olympics so successfully, and I think a lot of that legacy draws people there. But because production is so there's so much production in Vancouver, there is a spillover now across the Rockies into Calgary. So that, The Last of Us it filmed here, which is massive, right? That really put our production, ramped up our production. Under the Banner of Heaven was here. There's some really big name productions that are Fargo films out of here. So there's a lot of production that's going on this side too. But it boils down to, for every, you're getting 50 cents on the dollar easily if you're here.
Well, one of the other cool things about Vancouver is the immense talent that's there. You get so many people. I grew up in Seattle, and you get so many people from Australia and Southeast Asia that are dealing with visa situations, getting into the United States. That's one of the reasons why there is such a population burst in Vancouver, but you get all kinds of talent. So my second question is, now that streamers have made this huge demand for television programming, especially, you probably know where I'm going with this. All of the Crave TV stuff is on Hulu, and Schitt's Creek really, really skyrocketed Canadian television. I'm a huge fan of Letterkenny and
Kenny's awesome.
Jared Kelso, and all the weird spin-offs that those guys get to do. And, there's 10 actors and no locations. It's fantastic. But have we been missing out on Canadian programming for decades, or is it like there's more money going into interesting stuff?
Yes and no. So here, the funny thing about Canadian programming is it's governmentally legislated. So we have, CanCon, Canadian content, is a legislative thing. So every Canadian broadcaster has to have a certain number of Canadian shows to international shows. And love it or hate it, it's great because it provides some really good programming, but it also allows for some remarkably bad programming to get done. So it's not that you're missing out. It's just there are, there are pockets of really good shows, and then there's just some bizarre stuff that's out there. Like for me, I love Road to Avonlea, but that's a real Canadian thing because it's based on the Anne of Green Gables series. It's a Lucy Maud Montgomery property, and she's a famous Canadian author. But outside of Canada, I don't know how many people know Anne of Green Gables and Lucy Maud Montgomery. So I don't know how many people would gravitate to a show like Road to Avonlea, or Murdoch Mysteries, I think, is another really fun one that's done by CBC. And going back, decades in the 80s, there was a really fun show called The Littlest Hobo. And that is the ultimate in CanCon to me, because I have these huge fond memories of it, but I don't know that if it was produced outside of Canada, if it would have ever had legs or had the longevity that it had, just because I don't know that beyond CanCon it would have survived. Beachcombers is another one I think of that was just a fun Canadianism. And this great program in Seattle. You probably got Beachcombers. You're probably able to see it, and that's a super fun show like that. But to be honest, I don't know that anybody is missing out on Canadian content, but there are some real gems. Particularly, you look at something like Schitt's Creek, because it is the ultimate culmination of and showcase of Canadian talent. Right? I mean, Catherine O'Hara is
national treasure.
She really is, right? And not taking anything away from Eugene Levy or his son, but Catherine O'Hara is just, a phenomenal talent, and as you said, a national treasure. And to be able to have a writing staff. One of the things that I do find about Canada is that we do have a massive talent base that often goes untapped. We have some of the best writers, best comedians, best filming locations, best film crew, because I think being north of the border, we're, and I say this with all humility, a little bit more hardier. I mean, when you have to work, I just finished. It was in Celsius -40 here last week, just before Christmas. In Fahrenheit, that's -45 or 50. It doesn't matter when it's minus, it's cold, but we were working that. You just got to layer up, eh? And then all of a sudden you're out working in the elements. And I think that kind of leads to both the social identity as well as just kind of a work ethic that, we get it done. And I mean, you look at the number of comedians that have come out of Canada. I think the top 18 of 20 grossing comedians on tour right now are Canadian or have Canadian ties.
Well, it's so odd because you look at things like Peacock has helped out a lot, although it hasn't grown much for British television, because NBC Universal's relationship with Sky Distribution and with the BBC, you have period pieces and you have detective dramas, right? Yeah. But the number 17, 18, 19, 20 best detective dramas in the UK are all bangers. I mean, they're fantastic. And now those are available here, and you don't have to get BritBox or one of the super esoteric things. And as you mentioned, when you think of stand-up comedians, people on SNL, Second City, whatever, but then also music, Celine Dion and Shania Twain, who's having a great comeback. I didn't love her in Beauty and the Beast, though. It was weird. Yes. Angela Lansbury, it was odd. Should be British. But Drake, Bublé, Bieber. I mean, we got the whole thing. Ryan Reynolds, darling. But
we have all the hottest Ryans because we have the Reynolds and the Goslings.
Oh, that's right. Well, it's so funny because you have like people know that British Columbia and Alberta are perfect for the Hallmark movies. When you need like snowy town romance getaway, it happens all the time. And Letterkenny is uniquely self-aware, and it kind of makes fun of some of the Canadian tropes or relationships between Canadians and Americans, which is silly. But I've just come to realize that beyond the production company that does the Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hare and Best in Show and all of that stuff, there's just so much there. I'm a big Mike Myers fan, but he's got some deep cut stuff that is the Pentaveret on Netflix was a
throwaway line. An absolute
from the Axe Murderer movie.
So I Married an Axe Murderer. And that's not even his best known work.
So what was it like for you getting into acting? You mentioned, I mean, Vancouver is a hotbed for that, but were you going on auditions throughout school? Did you know you wanted to be on the silver screen?
I never knew that I wanted to be on the silver screen. I always knew that I wanted to perform. Like, performance is in my blood. And I did everything, singing, dancing, acting. I played instruments. I played in 2 different bands. One of them was even Juno nominated, which is our version of the Grammys. So I've always been a seeker of the spotlight. Like, I love to perform, which is funny because I'm actually an introvert. So like I love my time with me, but I love being in front of an audience. I don't like being in a crowd. I find crowded spaces very discomforting, but I love being on a stage, particularly with a really good ensemble where you have the energy of an entire group of people that is feeding the energy of an audience. And it's this symbiotic relationship. And I just, honestly, there's nothing more satisfying in the world. And so I've always had that performance part of it. The problem is I also knew the reality of being a professional stage actor in particular. And even if you move to New York and get on Broadway, you're still probably not doing a lot of shows, and you're definitely not making a lot of work. And there's a lot of ramen noodles and macaroni and cheese in your future. So some people look at it as selling out. Some people look at it as a strategic business move. I didn't care either way. I was going to work in film and television. And the nice thing about film and television is there's significantly more volume and there's quicker turnover. So it is easier to be a working actor in film and television than it is to be a working actor in stage. So stage was always kind of my treat reward. If I could do a production and get involved in it, like I was involved with Ragtime when it debuted. Livent is actually a Canadian company that put together the Ragtime tour, and then obviously it debuted. They had the big staging at Broadway when it got its Tony nomination. But we had a residency in Vancouver for I think 16 or 17 months, and that was just a beautiful thing to be involved in. But to pay my bills and be a working actor, I chose to do film and television, because the nice thing is you can pick up a gig a month and pay your rent, and that's a little bit more sustainable. Plus, you don't have background work in theater, but there's a ton of background work and stand-in work, and photo double work, and stunt work, and there's so many other aspects to the film and television industry that you can be involved in as a unionized performer or a non-union performer, but specifically as a unionized performer, which I've been since I think I was 8 years old.
So your filmography has got a couple of horror movies in it. Do you have a special penchant for that, or are you like expressive person with blue eyes who gets stabbed? Like what did you end up doing?
No, the funny thing about that is again, I think it's almost symptomatic of what comes to Canada to film. Oh, give me 2 moments because I'm about to lose power, so I want to plug you in.
No problem at all.
I realized late into our interview that I had neglected to do that one thing that was important, and that was plug in the laptop so that we could continue communicating. So to answer your question, the horror movies came about a lot because of what gets filmed in Canada, particularly at the time when I was in the height of my performance, so early 2000s. Again, it's cheaper to film up here, so productions that are trying to stretch production dollar tend to come up here first. So you're looking at a lot of horror films and like B-movie things and action stuff. And so I think, again, it's kind of a product of what is available to audition for. And then to my age, right? So there was between 20 and 25 was when I was really, really heavily doing a lot of film and television. And a lot of that is playing late teens and college age kids. And the storylines for late teens and college age kids are either coming, growing up adventures, or horror movies. So that's what you get, coming of age or horror, or coming of age and horror blended genre. So it's what was available. So yeah, I do have a large number of horror and sci-fi type shows on my resume, and a lot of that, again, too, I play a really mean guy really well, which is hilarious because it's polar opposite of my personality in real life. But I tap into it, and it just, it tends to be what I book. I don't book the nice guys. I don't book, even like now, I'm going out for dad. And I don't get the nice dads. I always get the mean dads. I'm always the guy who's like yelling at his kid, not supporting his kid, which like breaks my heart because in reality, I'm like, I love my kid. But no, if I'm going to book a role, I'm like that. I'm like the hockey dad, who's hard on his kid. And he has to, if you don't do that, you're never going to make the show kind of deal. And I was like, nah, I wouldn't do that though.
So when it comes to your resume makes more sense now because it comes to acting, speaking confidence, and whether that's on the stage, in front of a screen, in the boardroom, as you mentioned, in industries like safety or boardrooms of any kind, helping people with their presence. Is that also what your book is about? When did you decide to write the book?
So it's funny. The book came about because my agent told me I needed to write one. Because I was starting to do a lot of public speaking, and to get onto the larger stages, if you want to speak with the Tony Robbins and the Les Browns and that genre, the A-list speakers, Molly Bloom, you have to have a book. Like, you have to have a book and some credibility behind the book. You have to have usually a course or some kind of additional offering beyond just, hey, I'm going to get up on stage and speak. And so my agent was really harping on me because she was telling me, I can't get you on some of these larger stages. There's these opportunities for you to be there. They're asking about you, but if you don't have this book, we can't do anything. So you need to write a book. And I was like, well, I don't want to write a book. Like, no, I'm not an author. I don't want to do that. And so we started exploring some of these ways that a book could be made without a lot of effort. And I realized I had all of these training programs because again, film and television being in my blood, I recorded everything because I understood the idea of content and I wanted to be able to repurpose things. So all of my training sessions, all of my webinars, all of my live stage appearances, all of any bit of content that I've done is recorded. And so we compiled a whole bunch of my training material, grabbed the audio, transcribed it, and voila, Power to Speak Naked was born. And so it was the easiest part of the process was actually putting the book together. The hard part was then the promotion of it. 350 podcasts in 18 months is a whole lot of podcasts. There's a lot of podcasts. And then on top of that, you add on the TV interviews, the radio interviews, the speaking circuit, book signings, all of that stuff. It was a monster I wasn't prepared to have unleashed. I'm so grateful and thankful for the opportunity to have played in that process. But man, was it a lot of work that I didn't even expect. Because again, it was just my agent being like, if you want to speak on these big stages, you're going to have to get this. And by the way, that's a perfect impression of her. I know you don't know my agent, but if you had ever talked to her, that was like, everybody would be like, whoa, that's crazy. So it was one of those things where the book came about out of necessity and then took on a life of its own, to the point where now that is what I'm known for, beyond, Freddy versus Jason and Carrie and the rest of that.
Well, that's kind of where I was hoping to go to is, they say it's about the journey, not the destination. This podcast is about people with cool jobs, and I'm sure a lot of people would like tips on how to get into acting, but that's also a very difficult thing. And you help people with speaking and presence, and you could give me your 5 bullet points for that. But what I'm really interested in is kind of the experience that you've had doing it yourself. So many of my listeners and so many of the people in my orbit and of our organization are entrepreneurs who are some kind of service provider, have some kind of product, and they want to get on podcasts. They want to get speaking engagements. They want to maybe get a literary agent or a speaking agent, or how do they go about booking themselves? What do they do? Having been on 300 whatever podcasts and done a book tour and done speaking, what are some of the takeaways that you've experienced very recently in how people should promote themselves? Because so few entrepreneurs focus on their brand of who they are over just laying behind their product and hoping it's a good sales proposition.
Well, the first bit of advice I would give them is trust what's working for you, because there is no one magic bullet for it. And a lot of what I've done is trial and error to find the things that work for me, because there's things that work for other people, and then there's things that work for you. And mine is this real hybrid mishmash. I was lucky because I had credibility as a performer. So people, it's great, because the nice thing about IMDb is I don't control my IMDb page. Producers control my IMDb page, right? I do a thing, they enter the credit, it goes onto the Internet Movie Database. I have nothing to do with it. So that is independent of me. So I had independent social proof as a known entity and a quantity. So I had a leg up. Plus, I was familiar with representation. So I had no mental barrier in reaching out to agents and managers and PR agents to represent me, because I had to do that from an early age. Now, and again, I was super blessed because I didn't have to get my first agent. My mom got me my first agent. You know what I mean? And so when I went and did it independently on my own at 17 and moved out to Vancouver, I didn't even think about it. I was just like, oh, well, here's the list of agencies. Let's throw a resume and a headshot together and a cover letter, and, we'll blanket it. And I was lucky that I got probably the best agent in Vancouver to represent young actors in Sylvie Stoyanov, who runs and still runs City Talent. So it was just this unbelievable process for me to just be involved in that. So when I started doing this as a business, and I needed to get an agent who would represent me as a speaker as opposed to as an actor, the quick thing was to first ask my acting agent, do you represent speakers? To which she said no. Then I said, do you know anybody who does? And she said, well, I've heard of these two people, so I could use that as an introduction. I ended up not going with any of the people that she did. I found my own agent independent by speaking to other speakers and saying, who represents you? Like, how are you getting these things? And so I learned a lot from emulating and following other people who were doing what I wanted to do, which is how I've always learned and grown. So, my first advice to people is really pinpoint, first of all, what you want to do and then why you want to do it, because that will help facilitate those decisions. Because if you're doing it for the fame and fortune, you need a significantly different agent and PR engine than if you're doing it for money, and it was significantly different than if you're doing it for altruistic reasons. You want to have, influence on people or change the world or have a social cause or whatever. all three of those, and there's thousands of other versions. Those tend to be the ones that are the most important to me, right? I love the fame. I really love the money, and I really, really, really enjoy helping people. And I love when I can bring the three together. And so that, that kind of dictated my choices on how I was picking the people. But so, yeah, my advice is first determine what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it, because that will influence your choices of, do I get an agent? Do I do it on my own? Do I do that as a hybrid? What do I need to do? How do I represent it myself? Am I bringing my brand forward? Am I bringing me forward? Am I the brand? Is the brand me? How does that work?
So what I gathered from that too is you had the pedigree going into seeking an agent, where you had a body of work that people could find on the internet and obvious experience. So an agency knew that they could make money on commissions by booking you on stuff, because you're likely to get booked on stuff over someone who's never been in the limelight. So for some person in, upstate Michigan who wants to get into biz and they can't move to California, if you're at home on your laptop, what kind of communities can you connect with? What kind of content should you be making? Is it important to have a YouTube or a blog, or just get your name on stuff? What would you say?
I would say, again, ask what the end goal is. Because if the end goal is Hollywood, just move to Hollywood. Like, honestly,
you're better off waitressing and Sunset Avenue than
exactly, because you never know who you're going to be serving or who's going to be in that sphere. You want to be in the sphere of the people who have the influence to be able to help you. But if it's content, like if you're a creative and you want to get the content out there and it doesn't matter, well, then just start doing it. I'm working with one of the best playwrights and composers I've ever known in my life. Her name is Maren Burnham. Professionally, she goes by Maren Ord. She actually had a hit song in the early 2000s that was on the TV show Felicity. And she wrote a play that I got to, a musical that I got to be involved in. And it's called Feather Pen Fairy Tales. And it was just, it's a light, fluffy, fun thing that she literally wrote just to entertain her kids. But it was actually really, really good, and I was happy to be involved in it. And now she's written this other one that was like a passion project for her called The Gardener, that I have the extreme pleasure of being the executive producer for. And we're going to put it on here in Calgary. I think this play needs to be on Broadway. But, our local sphere of influence is here, and she's doing it not because she wants to make the money, not because she wants to create the fame. She's doing it literally because she just loves to create music and art and play with actors and singers and just have fun being creative, which is usually the best reason to be doing any kind of artwork. Because if you're doing it for the fame or the money, you're probably going to die very unsatisfied. But if you're doing it for just the love of the creativity, you'll always be fulfilled with what you're doing. And that's what she's doing. She's just doing it because she wants to do it, because she loves doing it. And so for that, person who's stuck in Michigan, and if the Hollywood is the goal, then move to Hollywood. I was 17, I moved to Vancouver. And I would have done that whether I had a resume or not, because that was my passion. That's what I wanted to do. So if that's what you want to do, move to LA, move to New York, move to Vancouver or Toronto.
Right. So for you, how much of your time now is split between acting versus the total buy-in, coaching, teaching, et cetera? I guess that also includes promoting your book and speaking.
Acting is a fun hobby now. I actually only got back into it because my daughter's 7, and when she was 11 months old, she got cast in her first commercial, and they needed a dad, so I got cast as my daughter's dad, which I thought was hilarious.
Love it.
To play her dad in real life and on TV, and so my agent was like, well, listen, you obviously want to do this and it's a passion. So why don't we just send you out and you can audition when it works for you? The nice thing is because I run my own business, I actually have a lot of time to audition. And then if I do book the gig, I can just shuffle my my schedule around. Like you'd pointed out, all the Hallmark movies are filmed up here, and I just did one with Shannon and Elizabeth a few months ago, and I was supposed to be doing. I was in the middle of an audit, a safety audit, and I just kind of hit pause on the audit for a day to go and film this movie, and then resumed my regular 9 to 5. So that I probably am auditioning maybe 1 to 5 times a month, depending on the month and what's coming through and what time of season it is. Like it gets really busy here in February because of pilot season. So February, March, April is usually busy. There's usually a big push for Christmas movies in the late or early and late fall. So August, September, October, we tend to film a lot of Christmas movies that then come out in December. So that, you pick up, but it really depends. And then I'm probably on 4 to 10 podcasts a week, which is, anywhere from a half hour to an hour per episode. And then I'm working regular full-time hours with the safety consulting, whether that's the training or the coaching or the auditing. It just kind of depends on what the client needs are and how those chips fall. So like I said, you'd ask right off the top, what does a day in the life look like? And honestly, I never have 2 days that are the same ever. Oftentimes how I think my week is going to pan out is never how it ends up. And those are usually the best weeks. If the week ends out, if I end the week the way that I thought it would end when it started, those are usually the boring weeks. And it's the weeks that, they're never wrenches, but there's a lot of detours that get thrown my way. And they're fun to navigate.
So knowing you obviously have been on a million podcasts, you probably consume a lot of podcasts, you're familiar with all the big speakers, you probably read the books. Are there any things that you are loving right now, a podcast or a book or something that you would recommend to people?
My favorite book actually is not a new book. It's a book that I first read when I was 14 years old, when I was tour guiding in Mexico. So throw that up onto the resume as well. Tour guide in Mexico. And it's called The Fool's Progress by Edward Abbey. And I love that book. I actually make all of my clients read that book because I think it is masterful in the way that it is, the way it unfolds a story, the way that it tells story, and the unbelievably good use of blending a current timeline narrative with a past reflective narrative that converge 3/4 of the way through the telling of the book. And I think, between that and Mike Birbiglia's My Girlfriend's Boyfriend special, which I make all of my clients watch as well, just so that they can see how drop loop narrative works and how you can come back thematically to a central story thread while picking up the details is something that I think is just awesome. And one of the trends that I'm absolutely loving right now is podcasts that are staying. So there was, for the last couple of years, for every 3 podcasts that would start that were brand new, you'd have 3 more podcasts drop off, and you'd find a podcast that you love and you're like, oh, this is so much fun. And you listen to, 20, 30, 40, 50 episodes of it. You're like, great. And then boom, it just disappeared. It just ceased to exist. And you're like, oh, and then, Spotify suggests that you listen to this because you listen to this, and you're like, oh, cool. And then you listen to this new one and you're like, oh, well, that's good content too. So I'll listen to that. And then 20 to 30 episodes later, gone. I'm like, why? What I'm loving right now is the upward tick in the number of podcasts that are reaching their 100 episode, 200 episode, 300 episode. My wish for you, Andy, is that Dream Jobs reaches its 500th episode. I would love it if you were on air for 5, 6, 7 years, because the content that you're putting together is just awesome. I love what you're doing. I'm not just not just a guest. I'm a fan.
Love
And
it.
so, that is one trend that I'm seeing that that I hope continues. That there's a little bit more longevity in these shows. The problem with that, because there's a flip side to everything, the yin to yang, is that for a long time the barrier to entry was very low for somebody if they wanted to start a podcast. Now, one of the things that I have noticed, particularly over the last 6 months, is a proliferation and propagation of companies who are promising you a top 10 slot, launch your podcast to top 10 in your category kind of thing. I find those to be incredibly predatory. And I think that there is starting to be this inundation of poor quality content and a lot more people who are having a hard time breaking into that barrier. Because it used to just be that you just needed, a microphone and some guests and an idea, and you could have a podcast up and going and 20 episodes recorded fairly quickly. And I even look at, a friend of mine, Chris Baisley, who is a phenomenal business mind, put together an unbelievably good podcast, and they were a victim of it too. I think they got to like 45 or 50 episodes and then just fell.
It's very hard. I took 2 years and built a podcast production company. We did about 1,500 episodes with 35 podcasts. And I think we had an incubator program and we had an accelerator and we helped people with their first 10, 20 episodes. But I think despite helping so many people launch and giving them all the right foundations and websites and covers and marketing and professional design, it still, I think we had 4 or 5 that went over 100, and several we ended up sending off to other production companies who have now gone on and done well. But there are even my own shows. I was living in Denver and I had a show called Coloradopreneurs, and it's awesome for people in Colorado to talk about their businesses. But that's actually, the precursor to this show. I do the same interview. It's just people not in Colorado. And I had one for a while called Cast of Pods, where I talked about how people get into podcasting. And like you said, I did 20 episodes. People got really mad when I stopped doing it because there were loyal followers, but I didn't like just listening to my own voice for 20 minutes. The teaching style ones are hard and not everyone can do it. Yeah. And so I've probably started 10 or 12 different concepts and I've made 200 something episodes, but they've gone into several different things. I think this one has done about 12 episodes now, and it'll go on forever, I promise. But on that note, I like to ask everybody right now, we're just passing into a new year. What is something that you're proud of? What is something that you're hyped about in your own life or career?
Beyond my daughter, because I'm super proud of her. I think the thing that I am most excited about is all the stuff that had to get canceled and postponed over the last 24 months is starting to come back. And it has been so long. Yeah, I had one live event that I got to speak of, two live events in May of this past year. One of them was a small safety conference, about 250 attendees. One of them was a larger business conference in Dallas, and we had about 4,000 people in. It was an arena show, so that was kind of fun. But it's been almost 2 years since I used to do that regularly. I was doing live presentations once a month kind of thing. And it was fun because at the time my daughter wasn't in school yet, so she could travel with me. And that was always my goal. That was always kind of my real push, was I wanted her to experience the world. And in fact, I just before you and I got on our call, and one of the reasons why I had my tech hiccup was because I had to take a call from a promoter who wants me to come down and do a thing for a week in Guatemala with people who are trying to publish books and get on the #1 bestseller. And he wants me to provide some training around, sure, you've got the book, but then you have to do stuff like this. How do you do it effectively? So a little bit of media training. And once you have the book and people start asking you to be, if you're a #1 bestseller, they're going to ask you to speak on stage. So how do you do that? What do you do effectively? And so working in some of the training with that. And it just happens to be that it falls on my daughter's Easter break. So I may be able to have her come down to Guatemala with me We're just trying to work out the details, and I'm trying to convince my wife that although it's a third world country, that my daughter is not going to be kidnapped, which is honestly her number one concern. I'm like, I'm saying Guatemala, and I think you're hearing something else. I don't think it's as bad as you think it is, but she needs to do her research before she'll pull the trigger on that. But that's one of the things that I'm really excited about is getting back into live events, being able to have my family come with me, being paid to travel as opposed to paying to travel, to experience different cultures. And that's the other reason why I got into this and why I'm passionately dedicated to it is I want my daughter to be able to experience various cultures, because that was one of the greatest gifts that I got growing up. I got to tour guide in Mexico. I got to live in Australia. I've lived in Malaysia. I've lived in Thailand and Singapore. I've had the chance to not live in, but visit for extended periods of time, Dubai and some other countries. So I've had, a very large exposure to the world, and I want my daughter to have that same thing. So this is a job that allows me to do that, and I'm going to continue doing it until people tell me to stop.
Tyler, it's been so awesome. If people want to follow you, consume your content, how can they support you?
Best thing they can do is go to my website, and I'm guessing if they want, they can hit pause right now and scroll down in the show notes and find it. But if they're going to do that, if they've already hit pause, they've already listened to this far into the interview, they obviously enjoy what you're doing with Dream Jobs anyways. So what I would ask, Andy, is before anybody goes to my website, they're already on your platform. So let's give a shout out to your platform first. So if they could do me a favor, hit pause. Before you scroll down to the show notes, you're going to see a group of little stars there. Maybe think about giving Andy a 5-star review. And if you can give Andy a 5-star review and say why. What was one of your favorite episodes so far? Was it this one? What kind of content would you like to see in the future? What were some of the other shows that Andy's done that you really enjoyed and you'd like to see incorporated into this one? Let's be specific with our review so that Andy can grow this platform, because that helps you, it helps him, it helps me. And if you're willing to do that and help everybody in this scenario, then as a thank you for helping out in the trifecta, you can come to SeanTylerFoley.com, which is spelled the proper Irish way, SeanTylerFoley, and say Tyler sent you. And as a thank you for doing that and coming through onto the website, if you click right above the fold, there's an invitation to join my Facebook group called Endless Stages. Come through the website, not through Zuckerberg's platform, because if you just go on Mark's website and search Endless Stages, you will find me, but you won't get the freebies. And those freebies are a free download, PDF version of my book, The Power to Speak Naked. You'll also get access to my Drop the Mic Speakers training series, and then the invitation to the Endless Stages Speakers group, where I go live every Tuesday from noon Pacific, 3 Eastern time, and do live training for whatever happens to be the hot topic in the group that week, because I believe in listening to my audience as opposed to talking to my audience. So I don't come up with the content that I'm going to do ahead of time. I usually take questions from the group from the week before, whatever the group happens to be struggling with, and then answer that question live on a training every Tuesday. So if that is something that interests you, by all means, do check out the show notes and come on over to SeanTylerFoley.com. But no 5-star review, no freebies for you. So make sure to give the props where props are due. Let Andy know what he's doing well, how Dream Jobs is going so far, what you've enjoyed, what you'd like to see more of, or rather hear more of, and we'll go from there.
Props where props are due for the freebies for you. There was a lot of rhyming, a few alliterations. That was awesome. And thank you, by the way. I'm terrible at asking for that. My producer, Jesse, is always on me about it, and I always forget. So to everybody out there, Tyler, this has been absolutely awesome. Dream Jobs, latest episode. This is a production of the Daydreamer channel, Daydreamer Media. My name's Andy. My handles are andy.the.daydreamer.com, or at on Instagram, and at Daydreamer channel, which is what it's now called. Our producer is Jessica Carmen. Thanks to everyone on our team. Thanks, Tyler. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.